Hello and welcome to Soma Yoga Class 4. We're going to be entering the core now. So we've been up to this point working the superficial layer of the fascia with Class 1, 2, and 3, prepping the body for this more deeper internal core work. So welcome to your core. Before we get started, I'm going to make sure that you have everything you need, and that includes a ball, you can use a tennis ball, a block, and a blanket, and a bolster to help with your seat if that helps you feel comfortable. And you will need a bolster for later on. So let's get started. Find a comfortable seat. Just notice how your pelvis feels. We're going to be focusing on the floor of our pelvis today, and so just start to connect with it by moving around this area of your pelvis by kind of rotating your upper body, just orienting yourself here. And the bony edges of our pelvis that we call the sits bones, try to make the weight even between the two. And you can play around with arching your back and rounding your back and just see how it feels in this area in your body. And begin to connect to your breath, that Ujjayi breathing. And see if you can begin to notice that as you inhale, the floor of the pelvis lengthens down. And as you exhale, the floor of the pelvis extends up. It's this buoyant motion that moves with your breath. Now bring your awareness to your respiratory diaphragm. This is the other end of the container of our core. We have the floor of the pelvis that acts as a diaphragm, and then our respiratory diaphragm holding all of our viscera organs together in this container. And so as you're breathing, see how these two diaphragms of the pelvic floor and of the respiratory diaphragm dance together. And then bring your hands to your heart. Reconnect with that intention that you set for yourself in the beginning of this series. And bow into your heart, the place where that intention lives. And then take a deep inhale, bring your chin back up. We'll sing Om together. Om. your hands, open your eyes. And now please bring your bolster, if you haven't already, onto your mat. And we're going to lie into reclined Baddha Konasana. So our feet are touching as we roll down onto the bolster, heart up. And breathe into your inner thighs here. Let your neck stay long. And you're going to take 10 long breaths to slowly bring your knees back up. So you'll rotate very slowly over your feet, connecting to your Ujjayi breathing. And you may have a little bit of shakiness in your thighs, and that's totally normal. So go ahead and begin. 10 breaths to bring the journey back up to your knees. It might help to just move on the exhale and pause where you're at on the inhale. You might be feeling a little bit of a burning sensation between your thighs. It's totally normal. Completing your last breath here. And once you've completed with your breath, you'll roll off your bolster, move your bolster out of the way, and then come back to your backs and stretch your feet out. And let your legs just fall as they would normally without any effort. And just notice if your feet are turned out. Most people's will do this. Perhaps yours turn in, that can happen too. But just take note of how your legs are in this pose. And now bring your hands to the hip bones. These two bones that are part of our pelvis. We can orient ourselves here. And I want you to draw a line from either hip bone to the center. And this hugging in from the hip bones to the center is essential for many yogic practices and just to keep your back in a safe place. So often you'll hear this drawing of a drawstring or a zipper-like motion between the sits bones. So pay attention to that area, and I want you to tighten your lower abs And use this area to bring your feet so that your toes are to the ceiling. Legs still on the ground. You can even place your hands to where that area is and see if those muscles activate as you rotate your feet up. And then bring it back down. Let your legs relax. And now I want you to not think about that internal core spot. And see if, when you just do it habitually, perhaps the effort's coming from your outer hips. This can be a pattern, and it's okay, but we're wanting to strengthen the core here. So instead of using your outer hips for this movement, go back to that drawstring between your hip bones and use that to bring your toes back, pointing to the ceiling. And while you're doing this, drawing the hip bones toward each other, this is also activating the mula bandha, which is the pelvic floor. They're connected in this relationship. So do 2 more, legs out to the side, relaxing, drawing the hip bones together toward each other. It's impossible to bring them together. As you bring your toes back to the sky. One more time. Firing can almost become this burning sensation if you're really bringing awareness to these lower abs. Okay, last one. And we'll roll over to our side, come back to seated, and we'll grab our ball. So just like class 1 and 3, we're going to go back to some familiar terrain on our outer hip. So position yourself. We're going to bring the ball to our right hip. Lift yourself up with your left foot so you can prop yourself up, also using your elbow. Bring the ball to where your outer hip is and then slowly lower down. And you might remember from previous classes where we might be headed. So you'll want to slowly roll around the top of your thigh bone. And this area on the side of our hip can be sometimes filled with juicy little fascial treasures. But pay attention if it feels different today, since you've been here twice before, and if the third time's a charm is helping you out, because the more we go into these areas that may be uncomfortable, the more our body opens up to them if we take an approach that's with compassion. So you're rolling around, and you're also taking care of your upper body, making sure that your shoulder is stacked, you're not gripping, your heart can stay open. You're always welcome to modify in a way that serves your body. So as long as you're getting into the area, you're welcome to play around. Breathing here. And now we're going to go down our IT band, the iliotibial tract, once again. And it's this band that goes from our hip all the way to our knee. And we'll be traveling the ball slowly down to the knee. So lift yourself up. The back leg really can help here. And you'll start to travel down. And you can play around with the flexing of the quad, the thigh, and relaxing it, and the pointing and flexing of the foot. Oh yeah. Some areas may feel more tender than others. And just breathe into it, turning into the sensation with curiosity and with kindness allows things to shift around. And if your upper body's getting tired from holding yourself up, you can always prop yourself like this, arms straight. And if you want more pressure, you can bring the top leg onto the bottom leg, and that creates a little bit more weight. I just want to remind you though that this is about releasing your connective tissue and fascia, not punishing yourself in any way. So you want to play with that edge of sensation, but not go over, because then that's where the tissue will just respond by gripping and not opening up. So I'm 2/3 the way down now. And just to reiterate why this area is so important to open up is it can help with bringing the feet into more of a parallel stance, which is important for the knees, which is important for the ankles, knees, hips, all of it. There's a connection to everything in our bodies, and so when our hips are really tight from a pattern of having our feet turned out, it makes it really hard for our feet to go back in. So it's this relationship between the two. So I'm nearly done on this side. Take another breath here. And bring the ball and come back to the front. Now we'll be going down the side of our shin once again. So you'll want to feel where your shin bone is, and then there's this muscle that's just to the outside of the shin bone, towards the outside of your leg, and then go a little bit under that, and there's this muscle that goes all the way down the side. So if you circle your foot, you can feel it kind of pop up when you do that. So we're going to go along this track of a muscle from the knee down toward the foot. And so you're welcome to do that by bringing your left leg behind like this and slowly bringing the ball further down with the help of your hands, or you can sort of scoot yourself. And it's important here to point and flex. It's this movement with the sensation which helps the neuromuscular repatterning to take place. It's being awake and active to the pressure of the ball. And then if you want more and your hips are available to do this, you're welcome to take a fire log-like stance. And just as a reminder, this is part of the stirrup that helps create our arches. It not only helps, it does create the arches of our feet. And so this outside part of our lower leg helps lift the lateral outside arch of our foot. So if there's something happening with our feet, it could be found in the lower legs, or if something's happening in the lower legs, it can be found in the foot. So, beginning to see how our bodies are really just this one whole thing. And we like to separate them into categories because then we can help understand it more. But to remind ourselves that it's just one whole structure with these seemingly independent parts, but they all work together. So I'm about 2/3 down the side of my leg, pointing and flexing. And you can play around with how much pressure you want at any point. And to bring in the yogic part, just connecting to the breath throughout this entire session or class, and staying open and aware in the rest of the body. It's easy to just, at least for myself, focus on wherever the ball is, and my head will go there. Everything goes just to that point, but can you, and I invite myself to do the same, stay aware in the rest of my body and your body while you're going through these different sensations with the ball. And we'll complete the outside of the right leg. Now we're going to start a new territory since we're headed into the core. We're going to literally start moving inward into this deeper sense of ourselves. And that begins with going on the inside of our leg. It helps to have a block. If you're at home and you have some large books, that'll do just fine. You're going to take the ball and put it onto the block, and we're going to work the inside of our lower leg. And it can be sort of a balancing act when you're further down on your leg. So you can prop yourself up in any way you'd like. Again, being aware and kind to the rest of the body. And you'll start to do the same thing, working the ball up from the foot toward the knee, the point and flex. So this is the other part of the stirrup that holds our inner arch of our foot, the medial arch. And you can use your hand to help create a little bit more pressure if you'd like. And this area can feel very burny at times. And that's normal because there's a lot of sensation on the inside of our legs. So if your ball gets to the edge of the block, just move the block so that your ball is to the edge closer to you, and you can work your leg down. It requires a little bit of scooching. And this is also accessing, so it's accessing these muscles that are on the inside of our leg, and it's also accessing this deeper muscle in our calf that we worked on class 2 called the soleus, which these deeper muscles are also called postural muscles or stabilizing muscles, are so important to be connected to. Often we're really connected to the more superficial surface muscles that are large, and we can fire those to help our movement. And it's these deeper muscles that can really serve us long-term for our structure. So that's what in the Soma sessions we address for the core work. And that's where we're headed with this class today. So I'm getting close to where my knee is now. You want to just explore with openness again and curiosity these places that maybe you don't normally connect with. And thank yourself for taking the time to do this. We're complete with the inner lower leg. We're going to move now into this inner thigh area, also called the adductors. Adduction means bringing the legs toward the body. And this requires a little bit of maneuvering as well. We're going to use the same idea with the block. It helps to have the longer side aligned with your leg. You can have your left leg out in front if you'd like. Sometimes I find that can help by going up further along this medial adductor line. And so you can even kind of lean over. Check on your low back here. You don't want to go into too much of a twist. And you'll start to bring the ball slowly up your inner thigh. And the pointing and flexing of the foot can help. Or the squeezing of the thigh and relaxing of the thigh. Oh, this can be very tight for many people, myself included. From biking, from walking, from, oh man, I don't know. So there's this thin muscle called the gracilis in here. For some of us, it can be so tight it feels like a ligament, and oh, you may find it. And it's sort of that good pain that's happening. If that's happening for you, breathe into it. Oh yeah. You might have to guide your ball back up to the front edge of the block. Oh. So in my body, when I'm in this area with the ball, I'm feeling it radiating all into my outer hip, in all sorts of places, but primarily I feel the outer hip and underneath where my hamstrings attach to my pelvis, and I'm feeling it radiate up to where my pelvic floor is. What happens is these attachments of our inner thigh, there's ligaments that attach, or tendons that attach the muscle to the bone of our pelvis, and they're all connected through connective tissue. And by coming into this inner thigh, we're accessing, in a way, our pelvic floor. So bring the ball. We're going into some sensitive areas here, so be sensitive with yourself. As the ball comes closer to that attachment point towards the base of your pelvis, and just see how this is making you feel. And you can start to rock your hip a little bit back and forth around attachment. And then we'll release. Now we're going to do the hamstrings once again. So we're working most of the leg here, except for the front side, which will be later on. So we're going to have the block the long way underneath the thigh. The ball is going to come to just above the kneecap, or behind the knee. And you're going to place the ball either on the block, and you can lift yourself up and slowly lower back down and rolling the ball up your hamstring. The alternative is to just use the ground, the ball underneath, and you can bring your other leg on top and lean forward. For my body, I'm feeling more when I use the block. You're welcome to play around with this. And if you're lifting up, you can use the left foot to help kind of prop yourself up. Can you stay open in your chest if you're doing this? And play around with flexing your thigh, relaxing your thigh, and see how that creates an opening perhaps in your hamstrings when you flex the thigh for a little bit, and then perhaps you can sink the ball a little bit further. And be kind to your wrists if you are propping yourself up. You can have your fingers pointing outward if that helps your wrists. And since these blocks aren't really very long, we can just migrate the ball back to the edge if you're using the block to be able to roll down further. And same idea, we're slowly rolling the ball toward our pelvis, to where the sits bones are. Staying connected to your breath. And now I'm getting closer to where the attachments are. You can bring the ball to the edge of the block to be able to come up to where the sits bone is. And you can just sort of roll over, side to side, moving your hips around slowly to get into where these attachments are. And then release. And now we'll stand up and do a little walk around and see if you notice a difference in your body. For me, I feel a lot of length in my side that I've worked, and this almost buoyancy, this lightness. But you might feel something different, and that's great. Just if you can tap into how you feel side to side, this is allowing you to tap into more of what's called interoception, which is the ability to sense yourself within, which is a really important skill to have. Now we'll do the other side to balance ourselves out. So bringing the ball to the outside of your left hip now. Prop ourselves up and lower. rotating around. Staying connected to your breath. And then we'll start to go down the IT band. So why is this notion of being able to sense yourself from within is so important? It's very much a big part of what yoga is and Soma, and that's why I see that these two worlds just complement each other so much. And why would it be so important to have this sense? And to me, it's being able to be smart in your body. When you're aware of what's going on these deeper levels, you can use your body in an efficient way. Or maybe not use is the right word. You can play with your body in a more efficient way that creates a sense of ease and joy. Versus having your body be sort of this disconnected thing that you lug around. And by tuning in more and more to the subtleties of what's going on inside of ourselves, we can practice this experience of going within. So on that note, take the next 10 breaths to complete this IT band on your left side. And when you're done with that, we'll come to our lower leg. Bringing the ball to outside. The outside stirrup for our feet. And that pointing and flexing once again. So a lot of the intent behind the Soma series is metaphorical with what's going on perhaps on an emotional level. We work the outside of the leg first to then warm ourselves up to then going on the inside. Because if we went straight there, it might be too much, right? And so slowly journeying in, and you know what I'm feeling right now on my outside of my leg while I'm here at the ball, I feel a direct connection with my ankle, which makes sense because these muscles run all along creating this support for our ankles, which our ankles are simply the bottom of our tibia and fibula bone, resting on top of the feet bones. And see if anything is popping up for you while you work your leg. And maybe there's nothing, and that's totally cool. But for me, I have this memory of my ankle that just came to mind while I'm working this area of when I twisted it. There's a lot of memory in this little area. I was riding on my mom's handlebars of her bicycle, and my foot went into the spoke and it twisted. So that flashed back just then, which is kind of cool if you think about it, to have these little moments of images come through. Perhaps for some, people can see colors when they're working the connective tissue. Others just feel something very strongly. And if none of these things are happening for you, that's totally okay. Because it's your own experience. And we'll complete that side. And bring the block toward you again. And we'll go on the inside of our left lower leg. This part can be a little awkward because it's like trying to balance this narrow part of our leg on a little ball. There's some creativity needing to happen to access these areas that we are able to do in a Soma session with our hands. And so I'm like, okay, how do we get here if people aren't able to do a splits? Because then, you know, we'll make do with the props. And you can roll your ankle here too. Perhaps that feels nice for opening this inner lower leg. And this sense of springiness that I was feeling after this side I worked may be coming from the fact that the inside of our leg is directly related to the mobility part of our foot, where the big toe and the inner arch correlates directly all the way up to our pelvic floor, which is the diaphragm, and it's like this trampoline type motion of upward energy when you use the Mula Bandha walk, which we'll go over if you're not sure what Mula Bandha is. And the outside of our leg is the stability part of our foot. So I'm working down, being more grounded. The inside is working up, feeling more lifted, expansion. So And if you're not feeling any of that, that's totally cool. Because who's to say what your experience is like, right? I'm becoming more and more convinced that that is what ultimate truth is whatever your experience is. So, and working this, so with that said, anything I say, if you don't agree with, you can just put it aside, toss it into an imaginary trash can. Something that is often noted about this inner leg is that since it's innervated with so many nerves that are connected to our sympathetic nervous system, which is a fight or flight response. So when you're in a state of stress, our legs can either cower in by being fearful, you want to protect your core, or they can straighten and be ready to fight. So this area may evoke some emotional responses and it may not. Sometimes these areas that can be very sensitive and deeper, it can be uncomfortable and we don't want to always go there. And it takes courage, it really does. It takes courage to explore these deeper parts of ourselves. So I'm about halfway up my inner leg. If I rotate my hips forward a little bit more, I can get different parts of the muscle fibers. And so with what I was just experiencing with my old ankle incident from when I was really young, probably 3 years old, so there's this idea that our tissue holds memory. And I mean, I experience it, so I believe it. And there's this idea of a difference between feelings and emotions, and that this comes from how we allow feelings to come through, like a true feeling. And this is based on Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's work with how she noted how people respond to grieving. And what she noticed was when there's a feeling, like a true feeling, it comes through you and it's expressed and it comes through your body and it no longer lives in your body. Emotions, on the other hand, are stories that we connect to this feeling that we haven't really felt yet. And it's a protective measure. Sometimes it's really overwhelming to really feel whatever we need to feel, and that can be scary. So we sort of mask it. But that energy must go somewhere, because that's sort of how things work in the physical world and physics too. Like it must go somewhere, right? And again, trash can, if all of this to you is just like, don't agree with. But that makes sense. If you don't fully feel something released through your body, it must be still there in some form. And perhaps it's in the form of adhesions or stickiness in your connective tissue. I'm going closer and closer to the inside of my leg towards the attachment. You don't want to, you want to be more towards the back part of the sits bone, because when you go too far into the inside, it can get very uncomfortable and nervy. And then rock your hip. And we'll release that. Do our hamstring. Up. So while we're working this core, working more inward, getting to these deeper muscles, we could be accessing these different parts of ourselves and also using different parts of our brain. In Soma world, we use this model called the three-brain model. And there's the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere, and the core brain. And the left hemisphere is where our speech center is. So right now I'm using it by being able to talk. And it's this left hemisphere that governs the whole right side of our body. And it really is an incredibly important hemisphere for logic, linear thinking, getting from point A to point B, time, linear time. So functioning in this society, the way it's set up right now with having schedules, being places at a certain time, is the left hemisphere computing, being logical. And so the other hemisphere, the right hemisphere, which governs the left side of our body, is responsible for the creative, the sense of no time, this dreamlike state that is more challenging to access in this culture because we really value this sense of linear time and working within that framework. And then the third part of the three-part brain model in Soma is the core. And this is the idea of current present moment in the body. And then the third part, the core brain, is as if you're driving in a car. You use your left hemisphere to know that you're going to get from point A to point B. And then, when you're in dream mode, when you're driving, you don't realize that you got where you're at because your mind sort of drifts. That's the right hemisphere. And then a deer runs in front of the car and you slam on your brakes. That's the core. The core is being right there, right now, being in that response of in your body. So let's get off of our hamstring attachments with that said. And stretch your legs out and just sort of roll them side to side. And then you'll spread them wide. Lift your hips with your fingertips and then arch your low back and sit back down. And just lean in a little bit to your inner thighs here. And you can sort of sway side to side. Getting into different parts of our hamstrings. And then bring your legs together. Come to standing. Root down with your feet. And just feel, after we've done both sides now, how you feel in your body. These classes are mimicking the Soma process, which is inviting the client or the student to access these various parts of ourselves, the left hemisphere of our mind, the right hemisphere, the core. So take a moment to just think about which of those three do you feel like you might be in use of most of the time. Perhaps you're balanced, and that's great. And just take a moment to think about if you feel more connected to your right hemisphere, left hemisphere, or core. And you can open your eyes, step out, wide-legged stance, bend your knees a lot, hands to your hips, and just kind of sway our hips side by side. And then bend even further. Lift your left heel. Move your hip around. Bring the heel back down. Now lift the right. Do a little Elvis-like move with your knee. Bring the hip back down. And now you're going to fold over. Knees still bent, hands to the ground. Keep your knees bent here. Let your head hang. Slowly begin to straighten your leg. And have the sense of pushing out through your back outer heel. Breathing. Bend your knees, push out with your outer edges of your feet. As you inhale, come all the way back up. Hands to the sky, bring them back to the front. Now bring your right foot out, left foot stays parallel to the back of your mat. You're going to bend your front knee into opening it up to a warrior two. And then lift the right heel and do that swaying, moving with your hips again. This motion with our heel lifted allows the joint of our hip to get acquainted with this new position of our legs before we just glue our foot down. And we'll set the heel down. And then lift the back heel. Bring it back a little bit further, and then set it back down. And now bring your heels toward each other and see how that activates your inner thigh. And then bring the energy back down your legs, through your feet. Hands to the side, elbows in. Palms facing out. And we're going to inhale, bring the elbows up. Palms still facing out. Exhale here. Then we'll inhale, bring our arms up overhead, palms up, elbows bent, and then fully bring it open to warrior two, looking over your right hand, staying strong in the lower legs. And then we're going to inhale, straighten that front leg. You can step the back leg in a little. Getting strong in both feet. Start to lean forward. Bring your right hip back as you fold into Trikonasana. It's great to use a block here. Press down your hand into the block. Bring your hand parallel to the floor. Draw your arm bone back into your shoulder. And then inhale your arm up to the sky. Look down at the block. Bend the front knee, inhale all the way back up. Feet parallel. Bring your hands behind your back. You're going to have your palms open so they're like a little cup. Elbows bent. Pull your fingers away from each other. And then inhale, get long. Bend the knees. Exhale, fold over. Perhaps you can straighten the arms a little bit. Go slow here. And then slowly straighten the legs. Let the head hang. can nod your head side to side slowly, saying no, and then yes. Bend the knees, press out through outer edge of your feet. As you inhale, come back up, and then you'll turn your left foot out for warrior two. Before we get here, fully, we want to add some movement into our joints. So we're going to lift the front heel and move your knee around a little bit. It's almost like doing a little dance. All of these attachments that we just worked with the ball for the bottom of our pelvis, the hamstrings, the adductors, they all play a vital role in how the mobility of our hips. And so by bringing in movement, now that we've worked these areas, it's going to help stabilize with the flexibility as well. And then bring the heel back down, lift the back heel, just stretch the back heel back a little bit further, place it back down, elbows to your side, hands in front, palms out. Inhale, elbows out. Exhale here. Inhale up overhead. And all the way out, look over the front. Check your front knee and see that the knee is tracking over the foot, not going too far in and not going too far out. And bring awareness back to that pelvic floor region, the mula bandha. Bringing your hip bones in toward each other. See how that helps perhaps stabilize this posture. Straighten the front leg. Inhale, get long. Grab a block if you need to for Trikonasana. You can bring it in front. Straighten the leg, triangle pose. Have your arm parallel to the floor. Draw your arm in towards your body. Inhale back up. Look down to the ground. And use your mula bandha here. That activation of the pelvic floor helps create this sense of suspension, energy moving upward, and a sense of lightness. Bend the front knee, push out through both feet as you inhale up, feet parallel. Interlace your fingers the other way, again with an open palm, palms facing up, elbows bent. Pull your fingers away from each other, still interlaced. Bend the knees, and then slowly lower on your exhale and begin to straighten the legs and straighten the arms. Breathing. Hands to your hips, bend the knees. Inhale, come all the way back up. And heel toe, feet back together. And now we will come to seated. So I want you to grab your blanket. If you don't have a blanket at home, you can use towels as well. The idea is you want it to be big enough so that you can have a wide enough stance and then bring your legs together. So you'll want a fairly big blanket or 2 different towels for either leg works. And if your knees get really sensitive, you can double. So I'm gonna have you come to, and this works if you have a tile floor, wood floor. It doesn't really work with carpet. If If you only have carpet at home, you're welcome to not do the movement and just stay in the stretch. So we're going to come to your hands and knees into frog pose. And the important thing here is, I'll show you from the side. A lot of times people want to do this and get out of the pose because it feels better. But we want to make sure that our hips stay over in line with our knees. And you want your feet, for right now we're going to have our feet not pointed out. We're going to have them just behind us because we'll be doing some movement. If you're at home and you're not doing the movement because you're on carpet, then you'll have your feet pointed outward for both sides. So we settle into this posture. Going to stay connected to your breath. We're going to inhale here. Exhale, bring your legs in toward each other. Inhale back out. Exhale back in. Inhale out. Exhale in. Inhale out, hold, and still breathe now. Take 3 breaths. Feet can be turned out. On your next exhale, feet can turn behind you. Bring the feet back together, legs back together. Take a break. Then we're going to inhale back out. Hold 3 breaths. Again, just make sure your pelvis isn't wanting to migrate too far forward. Feet turned out. Face relaxed, upper body relaxed. And then exhale back in. Take a moment. And then we're going to inhale back out. And this time, you can bring your forearms to the ground if that's okay and available for you. Feet are turned out. And we're going to do 3 rounds of Kapalabhati. Inhale. Begin. Take a full breath in, retain, exhale all the breath out. Perhaps you can go a little further in the pose. Inhale fully. Second round, begin. Fully inhale. Hold the breath. Exhale all the air out. Last round. Inhale. Begin. Inhale all the air. Hold. Exhale all the air out. And bring your hands underneath. Bring your legs together slowly. You can keep your knees wide, toes toward each other, and then fold back to a wide-legged prayer pose. Bring your hands underneath, walk yourself back up. You can move your blanket for now. And we'll come to seated. Feet on the floor. Bring your hands to either side of the outside of your knees. And with resistance, you're gonna press your knees in toward each other, but you're gonna resist it by pressing the knees out. This is resetting the hips after this deep stretch we were doing in frog. And then we'll bring our hands on the inside of the knee. Try to widen the knees, but press into the hands using resistance. You might have a little shaking. It's completely normal. Then your hands on the outside of the knees. Resist. And then on the inside. So what this is doing is resetting the joints. After doing long stretching, it can throw off our proprioception, which is how we orient ourselves in space. And so this resetting is really important so that we don't injure ourselves. Now we're going to bring our heels in toward our hips and lift up into a squat. So you want to have your heels toward each other, knees out, like so. If this is okay on your knees. And then you're going to bend the knees, keep them bent, inhale, bring your feet parallel, stay on the balls of your feet here, bend your knees a lot, so your knees are almost on your chest, and then slowly lower your heels down as you straighten your legs. Bring your big toes together, bend, come up onto the balls of the feet, bend the knees, slowly lower into a squat. You're on the balls of your feet. Again, make sure this is okay for your knees. You don't have to go all the way down. And then keep the pressure on the balls of the feet as you slowly bring your knees toward each other and keep the knees bent. And then begin to slowly straighten the legs as you bring the heels to the floor. Now widen your stance. We're going to come up onto the balls of our feet, bend the knees, slowly lower into a squat. And then straighten as you come back up. Widen your stance a little bit more. You can have your feet angled out a little bit as well. As you slowly lower, come up to the balls of the feet, lower down to a squat. Perhaps you can find a distance where you can bring your heels onto the ground, hands in front of your chest, and you can press your elbows into your inner knee and your inner knee into your elbows. And that can help open up the chest a little bit more. Breathing here. And then Hands to the ground, parallel your feet, come onto the balls of the feet, bend the knees, stay on the balls of the feet as you inhale. Halfway up, bend the knees a little bit more as you slowly lower the heels down, then begin to straighten the legs. You can heel toe your feet closer together. Stay strong in the feet as you inhale, come all the way up. And hands to the heart. So now take your bolster. If you have one, if you're at home and you have pillows, you're welcome to use that as well. If you're familiar and comfortable in crow pose, then you may not need this, but this is going to be here for a sense of security, of safety. So the pelvic floor in this region of the inside of our legs that we've been working can have a correlation with fear. And this pose is a wonderful way to address some of our fears of course, it's intelligent to not want to fall on your face. So a lot of these arm balances that we do, it's a little scary because we don't want to fall and hurt ourselves. So by having this bolster here can help with some of that fear. And then the Mula Bandha, that pelvic floor spring action, is what is vital to help get into this pose. And so since we've been focusing on that, we will bring it into use with this pose. You don't have to go up. We can stay on the ground, but if you want to just entertain yourself by bringing one foot up, then the other, that is just as good. So you're going to come back into your low squat. And then you're going to bring your hands onto the ground. Check out where they're placed. You don't want their wrist creases to be crunched, so make sure that they're parallel to your bolster. And then you're going to bring your knees up, come onto the balls of your feet. Bring your knees closer, higher up onto your arms. What's important here is looking forward to where you want to go. If you look back, that's where you may land. So look and see where you want to go, which is ahead. And you keep your heart lifted, almost like you're in a cat back. So you're pushing the floor away. Elbows can be the shelf. And then you'll slowly lean forward by squeezing your pelvic floor, using that area in your core. Heart's lifted. Perhaps you just lift one foot. You can bring that other foot down. You can lift the other foot. Bring that down. If you're comfortable, you can lift both and bring the heels together. Lifting up with that cat back, looking forward. Breathing here. And then slowly coming back down into your squat. And then inhale. Slowly bring your legs back to straight and forward fold. Now, you're welcome to stay with crow and playing with one foot up, the other foot up. If you're comfortable with that and you'd like to do tripod, you can do that now. So we'll come into our low squat. Come up into the balls of the feet. Lift your hips high so that you can get your knee higher up on your arm. You're going to look forward. If you're staying in crow, you can just come into crow now, or by lifting one foot. Wherever you're at is just great. But just acknowledge if there are any fears that come up. And if you'd like to go to tripod, you're welcome to slowly lower your head by lifting your pelvic floor up, squeezing that midline. You can come up, legs spread. Your arms are staying at a 90-degree angle. Breathing. And then you can bring your heels back together, hollowing the core as you slowly lower back down to your arms, heels together, and inhale back up to crow, and then back down into your squat. Lift onto the balls of the feet, bend the knees, and then straighten as you fold. Hold your elbows. And you can shake your head no. And yes. And we'll come back to our hands and knees. So check in with your hands here. We're going to bring our right foot back, press out through your back heel. Press the ball of the foot into the ground and see how that fires up that area of the core between our hip bones, and then just lift the left knee an inch, hovering here. Using the Mula Bandha, pelvic floor lifting, and then place the knee back down, right knee back to meet the left, bring the left leg back, press back with the left heel, press the left mound of the foot into the floor, and then see how that activates the area of the core between our hip bones. Using that Mula Bandha, lift the right knee and just hover. Your thighs are also working. And then bring the leg to meet the other, plank pose. Firing up, bringing the hip bones toward each other in that zipper-like drawstring motion. And then bend the knees. Lower back down, prayer. Inhale, come back up. And come to Baddha Konasana once again. We'll bring our block and place it under your mat, like so. So actually, you're gonna place the block on the top of the mat and then fold your mat over your block. You're gonna bring your feet in the Baddha Konasana on top of the block. And this is accessing this stretch in a different way. Have your hands behind you, fingers turned out. Lift the chest, open the heart. And press in with the pinky toe side of your feet. And then the heel. And the pinky toe side. And the heel. And the big toe side. Pinky toe, heel. Big toe, pinky toe, heel. And you can relax that. And you see how those various points of our feet activate different parts of our hips. And we'll slowly bring our feet, using the block, to move toward an angle. So we're bringing our feet toward the floor at this angle, propping up on a block. I'm going to a point that's okay for you and your hips. In my body, this block at an angle that's propping my heels up and then my toes down is accessing my outer hamstrings. Breathe there. And then you can come back up. Remove the block. Hug your knees in. Reset the hips. Press on the outside of the knees. Resist it. Inside of the knees. Resist. Outside. Inside. And then hug your knees in. We're going to use the pelvic floor and the core to slowly lower ourselves down through Navasana. Squeezing between our hip bones. Arms opening to the side. Stay long in the neck. We're about 4 inches off the ground. 3 inches off the ground. Squeezing between the hip bones. 1 inch off the ground, hover here, and release. You can press the back of your head in the ground so you can lift your chest up, bring your shoulders back. And letting yourself just relax into the Shavasana. Releasing any Ujjayi breathing. Feel the weight of your pelvis into your mat. And just see how gravity is hugging your pelvis into the earth as it gets heavier and heavier and heavier. Now notice your head hugging against the earth from gravity. And it's getting heavier and heavier as it's sinking further and further in. And now your feet anchoring down into the earth. And with these 3 points, taking all the other parts of us with it, sinking further and further in to the earth. to bring some breathing back into your body. Some more full breath, filling yourself up. Creating a sense of space and lightness in your core. Notice how the inhale extends the pelvic floor down to your feet, and the exhale brings a sense of upward of the pelvic floor, up. This buoyancy that exists inside of us always, it's there. To help lift us up. Begin to wiggle your toes and fingers. Bringing more of that breath and buoyancy into your body. Reach your arms overhead. Get long. And roll over to a side. Take a breath. And stretch the top leg out. Use your hands to help guide you back up, not using your neck to effort. To see it stay with your eyes closed. Hand in front of the heart. Connect back down to the pelvic floor and see how it supports and lifts with every breath. Take a deep inhale. Namaste. Thank you so much, and look forward to class 5.